the offseason started kind of the way that it generally does, although it doesn't generally start with a pandemic. But we obviously started with a lot of the kind of day-to-day stuff in college hoops, the grad transfer market, the transfer market, the situation where players are now reclassifying. We talked about a lot of that stuff to start the offseason. Then I kind of switched into this coronavirus mode, and it's not because I claim to be a medical expert, but as I told you from the beginning, there are so many things going on with so many sports, and it's my job to follow this stuff, so I might as well keep you guys updated. And some of you love college hoops and maybe golf or NASCAR or tennis or baseball or basketball, the NBA, and I just kind of wanted to keep everybody abreast. Obviously, on the college sports scene, I thought there was a lot of misinformation out there, and so that's where that started. And I kind of did that for about 2.5, 3 weeks, and you guys loved it. The response was incredible. And so I was doing that, and it was great. And I kind of stopped doing it because everything seemed to be trending in the right direction. College athletes were returning to campus. As I said last week, some were obviously testing positive but were asymptomatic, which I actually thought was a good thing, and I explained why in the previous episode. And NBA was going to return. Golf was already back. UFC is back. NASCAR is back. And everything seemed to be going good in the coronavirus world. And so I kind of just backed off that a little bit. And then this weekend happened. And then all hell broke loose, both with the NBA and Major League Baseball. Both sports, I believe, look very bad, both at the ownership level, specifically in Major League Baseball, but also with the workforce, with the players in Major League Baseball and the NBA. And I want to kind of explain to you what happened. I know a lot of you guys are getting back to normalcy in your lives and maybe weren't able to follow this stuff moment to moment, day to day. And so I'll give you an update on both of these sports and why I believe that these modern athletes, man, and I'm not trying to stereotype or generalize, but these baseball players, these basketball players, I just think they are totally out of touch with what is going on in this world around them, the world that you and I live in. And I just kind of want to explain what's going on and why I think these guys are completely out of touch. And so let's get into starting with the NBA. And I think if you're looking for a broad timeline of the NBA, they were obviously the first sports organizations, sports league, whatever, to shut down. And they were really kind of slow to get back. And I was very critical of that throughout time. But I think the reason for that was very simply they want to have all their ducks in a row, right? They didn't want to have owners asking questions, players asking questions, coaches asking questions. They want to have a pretty good policy in place to get things back on the court, and that is why they move slow. And so when we saw everything that came out about 10 days ago now that the NBA was coming back, that it was going to be in Orlando at Disney's Wide World of Sports, and that it was going to start on July 31st in this bubble environment, it was because, as much as I'm critical of the NBA, I'll give them credit. They crossed all the T's and dotted the I's, and before they put a public plan out to the public, they want to make sure everything was set. So everything was good. They have 1 million calls. They get the owners on some calls. They get the players on some calls. Everybody asks questions. Everything seems to be going well. We put a plan in place, and then this weekend happened. and what really happened this weekend is two things. So the Kyrie Irving deal, and Kyrie Irving's kind of a crazy character in all this to begin with, because Kyrie is a one of the player reps in terms of the players union, the voices in the players union, and he was actually on all these calls all along to begin with, and he didn't really ask any questions. Like, there's a good article from Woj that he basically, he was on these calls and he's asking about, well, we have access to a sauna, what kind of beverages will there be, what kind of food will we be eating in this bubble? And he doesn't really say anything. And then on Thursday, Friday, whenever it was, you start to hear reports that Kyrie is kind of organizing this uprising within the players. And where Kyrie specifically felt like the voices weren't being heard was that he felt like if we go into this bubble and we focus on basketball, the social progress going on off the court is going to be pushed to the side. And all of a sudden, we're going to be talking about who won last night, who lost last night, and whatever progress is being made in broader society is going to go away. And, Kyrie can feel that way. Other players have said otherwise. Austin Rivers actually came out and said, listen, the best way to use our platform is to actually play these games where people will be, the spotlight will be on us. We'll have TV cameras on us. We can make more money to give back to our community. So the Kyrie thing was wild, but it spoke to kind of a broader thing that happened in the NBA, and the Kyrie stuff made all the headlines. But the broader thing that happened in the NBA is that I think after that kind of big call, the big to-do about we're coming back and we're in this bubble, I think really over the last week or so, I think the players kind of realized like, oh, like some of us are going to be in a bubble for up to 3 months here, and I don't know if I like it. And so what really happened, the Kyrie thing was kind of a broader thing. Again, if you read the reports from Woj and Shams and all the guys that cover this league, you kind of see that the Kyrie thing was the overarching thing with all sorts of players having all different kinds of questions, right? So Kyrie's thing was he didn't want the teams to come back because of the social justice movements going on across America. There's other players that don't want to go to a bubble because they don't want to be away from their families for a month, 2 months, 3 months. There's other players that don't want to go to a bubble because they're actually afraid of health risks, right? There's going to be employees coming into this bubble from the outside, whether it's bus drivers, cleaning ladies at the hotel, cooks, chefs, whatever. Some players are actually scared about the health risk. Some players just don't want to be in a bubble for 3 months. You have some players, I saw this was kind of interesting, Donovan Mitchell is a little bit worried about injuries. He's saying like, look, and I'm not even going to blame Donovan Mitchell on this one. He's basically saying like, look, I am up for a massive extension this offseason, and if something happens in this bubble, I could be out tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And so the Kyrie Irving thing was kind of the broader overarching kind of idea that NBA players have kind of come to the idea and come to the realization, hey, we're going to be locked up here for, not locked up's the wrong term. We are going to be, in this bubble for 2-3 months at a time. And like, that really doesn't sound all that fun. Now, I will defend the Major League. I will defend some of the players in that I think the vast majority of players kind of understand that this is what you got to do, right? Kyle Kuzma came out with a really strong tweet when all these reports came out. He said, dude, don't get it twisted. There's a lot of us that just want to hoop and compete for a championship. LeBron James was apparently very upset, surprise, surprise, with Kyrie for kind of setting up this call. After all of these months of planning, Kyrie out of nowhere kind of sabotages it. But I think it comes to the broader point that NBA players are really starting to have real questions about this bubble for a number of different reasons, not just the social justice stuff with Kyrie, but also, again, being in a bubble, having people come in from outside, the amount of testing, the fact they'll be away from their families, the fact that some of them don't have families, they're single and they're ready to mingle. So that is the situation with the NBA, and it was, I think, a very frustrating weekend behind the scenes for people in the NBA, including the head of the NBA Players Association, which kind of came out with a very strongly worded phrasing that basically said, like, look, we agreed on all this. I don't know where this is coming from. So that's what's going on with Major League Baseball, or that's what's going on with the NBA. Major League Baseball is another story altogether. And they make the NBA players look like the most harmonic, in tune, get together, everybody kumbaya stuff that we've ever seen. And so here's what's going on with baseball. So baseball, I kind of laid this out 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, but the situation with baseball is obviously different because baseball, they never started their season, right? The NBA was 60, 65, 70, whatever it was, probably closer to 80% of the way done through their regular season when their season was halted. Baseball was just about to begin. And so when all of this started, Major League Baseball kind of came out and they just basically said, like, look, let's come to a plan right away, and everybody agreed upon it. And basically the plan was that players, we're probably not going to play a 162-game season, but that players will get prorated salaries, which means that they will get paid for every game that is actually played. So if 100 games get paid, players get paid for 100 of those games. If you play 85, 82, 81 games, players get paid for 81 games. And that was the plan, and everything was all well and good and kumbaya, and this was in April and early May. And then all of a sudden, the owner said, wait a second now. That original proposal, the one that I just said, prorated salaries, you get 100% of your salary for the games played, that was under the assumption that when we come back, we are going to have fans in the stands. And when it became apparent, like, we're probably not going to have fans in the stands, the owner said, wait a second now. We have to go back to the drawing board on this, and we got to talk about this because we believed that there were going to be fans in the stands. And for people who don't understand, 40% of revenue in baseball comes from fans in the stands. And so it comes from the things that you do at the ballpark: parking, concessions, merchandise, tickets. And then Major League Baseball owners were saying, like, look, we were planning on having all that revenue, but now that we're not, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And so ever since then, over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, it has been a back and forth between players and owners, and they can't agree on anything. And the number one thing is that the players are not willing to give up salary. They're saying, if we play 100 games, we want to get paid for 100 games. If we play 30 games, we want to get paid for 30 games. And so finally what happened on Saturday was that basically the MLB Players Association basically gave up even trying to negotiate with Major League Baseball, or with the owners, excuse me. They basically gave up, and the way it works is at a certain point, if they can't come to an agreement, the commissioner and owners can basically just say, we're playing a season, and we got to get going here. And so that's essentially what happened on Saturday when they couldn't come to an agreement, and the Players Association head, whose name is Tony Clark, basically said, we're done negotiating. It's over. Just tell us when we're going to show up, and tell us where we're going to show up, and tell us when and how it's all going to go down. And so why do I bring it up? It's because it is looking like we are going to get a baseball season somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-ish games. And the players will get the 100% prorated salary. But what basically has happened is the owners are saying, like, look, if you're not going to get off this 100% of your salary thing, then we're going to play the fewest games possible so we don't lose a ton of money. And so I'm not saying that I'm 100% on the side of the owners. I hate the players. But what I am saying is I do understand the owner's perspective of the revenue that we have coming in is nowhere near what we were expecting. And so because of it, you guys got to make some sacrifices. And so what it looks like is we're going to get about a 50-game season. We will get absolute clarification on Monday. By the time you listen to this, we should have an idea of what the Major League Baseball season is going to look like. But it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 games. Because what you need to know is that the TV networks have basically said, like, look, baseball is great, but we don't want you guys finishing your regular season any later than the end of September, because we got a lot of football. We got college football. We got the NFL. We got Thursday night football. We got Monday night football. And so the owners are saying, like, look, the season's got to be done September 27th. And whenever they agree to this shortened season, it's probably not going to start till at the earliest, like July 15th, maybe end of July at this point. And so it's going to end up being 50 games. And so why do I bring this all up? And what does the MLB have to do with the NBA? I believe that these two situations that happened over the weekend are intertwined. And they're intertwined in the sense that the modern athlete, and it's not all of them, again, credit Kyle Kuzma, he wants to play. Credit LeBron, who's saying, I want to get back on the court. So I'm not criticizing every single NBA player, every single Major League Baseball player. But what I do think is it speaks to the fact that these guys are completely out of touch with reality. And why is that? The reason is simple, is because if you look at these two situations individually, at this point, it is no longer about health concerns, right? I mean, I think the number one thing, I think we can all agree, the one thing that unites us as Americans over the last couple months, we're trying to figure out how to handle this virus on a day-to-day situation, okay? And we as regular citizens, we have what we call a new norm, right? Is that not the number one topic or phrase of the last couple months, is the new norm? Many of you are, you're wearing face masks when you go to work. Many of you, when you go to a restaurant, if they're now open, the server is wearing face masks. Some places you can't even eat in a restaurant yet. You can only eat outside. This is the new norm. We are getting used to a new norm as society. And the one thing that I have been consistent about in the sports world, whenever it comes back in whatever sport, it is not going to look the same. Think about the sports that have already come back. UFC, no fans. Boxing, no fans. NASCAR, no fans, although they may get some in the stadium soon. And with basketball, the new norm is going to be playing in this bubble without fans, and you're going to have to be away from your family. And in baseball, the new norm is like, you're probably going to have to take a pay cut. And these guys refuse to accept that there is a new norm in their sports. And that's what frustrated me. And like I said, I've been saying this from the beginning. Whenever we get sports back, whatever sports that we are going to get back, and on whatever time frame, They are going to look different. They are going to feel different. And we are seeing that right now with UFC, with NASCAR. And these baseball and basketball players don't seem to understand that. They live in a world where they want everything exactly the way it was, and that is just not realistic. And what is especially frustrating is that it's just showing the disconnect again for the 100th time between us as fans, us as consumers, and them as professional athletes. And I think about where we are in this country right now. Again, the new norm, life, masks, social distancing, whatever. But also the stuff that I've talked about on this show time and time again, the economy that we're in, the fact that 40 million people over the last 3 months have filed for unemployment, the fact that millions more, if not tens of millions, I've seen a speculation of as much as 100 million people have taken a pay cut, have taken a salary reduction. We are all, as a society, living in uncharted times where we have to live with uncomfortable circumstances that we could have never seen coming. And so when I look at basketball and I see these guys saying, oh, I can't be in a bubble for 3 months. I can't be in a bubble. I can't be away from my family. Well, first of all, let's just let's just take a deep breath and let's just do some quick mental math here, okay? 22 teams are entering this bubble for this tournament, for the situation. There's a tournament, there's the playoffs, there's whatever. 6 of those teams are not even going to make the playoffs. So 6 of those teams are going to be in the bubble for like 2.5 weeks, and then they're out. And then after the first round, half of the teams get eliminated. You go from 22 teams to 8 teams in basically a month. So you're talking about now 16 out of the 22 teams are going to be out in a month. And then we're going to slowly pare down from there, and it's basically going to be 2 teams that are in the bubble for a month. 25 guys, 40 guys, whatever. If you include coaches and staff and whatever, we're talking about 40 guys. That's really all we're talking about. We're not talking about hundreds. We're not talking about every player. We are talking about 40, 50 people total that are going to be in this bubble for 3 months. And again, it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. Yes, it sucks. Yes, I feel bad for players that are going to potentially be away from their families. But this is no longer about health. This is about inconvenience. And guess what? We have all been inconvenienced over the last month. We have all been inconvenienced over the last 3 months. We all have a new norm. And for one season, you got to accept it, man. You got to accept that you're going into a bubble and you might not have every piece of food available that you want. You might not have your family by your side. But that's the new norm. We're all dealing with something different. And oh, by the way, baseball players are even worse. You're even worse. Because like I said, the NBA compared to Major League Baseball, the NBA is kumbaya. Everybody's holding hands. Everybody's locked arms. Major League Baseball, are you kidding me? These players that refuse to take a salary reduction, do you understand what I said a minute ago? 40 plus million people, through no fault of their own, no longer have jobs. Some of them, very fortunately, have gotten them back, but 40 million people have lost their jobs. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not tens of millions more, have had to take salary reductions. And it's not just a little guy. Go to every major corporation in America. People are taking salary cuts. CEOs, leaders of companies, college football coaches, college basketball coaches. I've named the names on this show, but Chris Mack has had to take a pay cut. Sean Miller has had to take a pay cut. On and on and on and on and on. And guess what? They still got to show up to work every day. You haven't showed up to work and you still want 100% of your salary? Get out of here, man. That is not realistic, and that is not fair, and that is not reflective of where we are as a society. And so what has been so disappointing to me is what I just said a minute ago. These guys are out of touch, and it's no longer about the health concerns. It's no longer about me being worried about getting the flu, getting the coronavirus. It's no longer about that. Because if it was about that, those are legitimate concerns. Now, I've reeled off the stats that say that it's actually relatively safe for young, healthy athletes, but that's at least a legitimate concern. And some guys have expressed those concerns. Mike Trout, who has a newborn baby, Major League Baseball, has kind of said, I don't really know how I feel about coming back this season. There's been other players who say the same. And if that's your concern, I can rock with that. I don't know that I agree with it, but I can understand it. But your concern is about money, is about dollars and cents. When 40 million people lost their jobs, your concern is about being away from your family when many people can't provide for their families. It's pathetic, it's sad, and it's about inconvenience in a world where we have all been inconvenienced. And it is so disappointing, and it is so frustrating. And it boggles my mind how out of touch all of these guys are. And it's not one of them. It's both sports. It's the majority of them. I don't know what percentage. Like I said, credit LeBron James. He wants to play. Credit Kyle Kuzma. He tweeted, I want to hoop. And some guys have legitimate concerns. Like I said, I think Donovan Mitchell has a legitimate concern. He doesn't want to lose a career, a life-changing salary that is coming his way this offseason. And so he has talked privately with the league about the possibility of setting up some kind of insurance policy for players like him, Jason Tatum, Bam Adebayo, De'Aaron Fox, who are due for that really big contract that's life-changing. That's a legitimate concern, and there's a legitimate solution. But for these guys that don't want to be inconvenienced by going into a bubble, don't want to be inconvenienced by being away from your family, I'm sorry. That's the reality, the new norm. We're all dealing with it. And none of us as fans have any sympathy for you. And I'll just tell you, I'm just curious the long-term ramifications of all of this arguing, because I do think there's going to be long-term ramifications. And listen, I'm not going to sit up here and do the whole, I will never go to a baseball game again. I will not watch the NBA playoffs because they're selfish. No. Next summer, when ballparks are open, I'm probably going to go to Dodger Stadium and crush some beers and some Dodger dogs. I'm going to watch the NBA playoffs. Like if Zion is the 8th seed against LeBron, I'm not watching. But I think these athletes have to realize, man, like, dude, you got to make some concessions. You got to work with us here, especially in this climate, especially when people are getting back to normal, and especially, by the way, when people have come to realize that life goes on without sports. We got a lot of options right now outside of sports. Many of you are getting back out, getting back to normal, spending more time with your families, going on walks at night, maybe going out to dinner now, going to amusement parks. And then, of course, there's the typical stuff, Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. We got a lot of options right now. And I'm just saying, my life, even without games, I've still been able to do this show 2 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week. People have been able to do radio this entire time. We have options without sports. We have options without you. And I'm not saying that LeBron, is a terrible human being or whoever, Kyrie or anything. But what I am saying, I do think they're out of touch. I do think that they are out of just reality in terms of how they are acting and really out of touch with the people that help pay their salaries, which is us as consumers. Whew. All right. I think that's just about it for this segment of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. You got me fired up. I'm running around my apartment yelling and screaming. People got me all fired up. It is so surreal to me to watch this all play out. I think baseball actually looks a little worse than the NBA, but even the NBA, man, it's like, come on, man. We're all trying to get through this. At the end of the day, yes, you're very well compensated. Yes, I understand you don't want to be away from your family, but you got a job to do just like we all got a job to do, man. And we can't just duck out of our job because it's inconvenient for us. And that's the big takeaway to me. It is no longer about health and safety. It is about inconvenience, and baseball players and basketball players don't want to be inconvenienced.